Before we begin, I want to wish all the dads in the room happy Father's Day. Fathers don't get much respect anymore. Have you ever noticed that boys grow up spending hours and hours throwing footballs and going to games with their dads? And when they make it big on the college scene before the bowl game, they get interviewed. And the first thing they say is, "Hi, Mom." No, fathers don't get much respect anymore. But the news on Father's Day isn't all bad. The National Center for Fathering conducts Father of the Year essay contests in partnership with local schools and sponsoring organizations. One year, 8 contests were held, and altogether over 100,000 school children submitted essays on the topic, "What My Father Means to Me." Here's a sampling of essays from past contests. A first grader writes, "My dad is the best dad ever. I would kiss a pig for him." Another first grader writes, "My dad is a Frito-Lay man. That is an important job because Frito-Lay means chips, which is food. That is so important because you could not live without food." A third grader writes, "The dad in my life isn't really my dad. He's my grandpa, but he's been like a dad to me since before I was born. I hope that as I get older, Grandpa will teach me all the stuff he knows about wood, first aid, and everything else he knows about. My grandpa isn't my father, but I wouldn't trade him for all the dads in the world." A fourth grader writes, "Sometimes as a joke I'll put my stinky socks in his briefcase, so at work the next day he will think of me. He's always at the concerts and plays that I'm in, even though he lives about an hour away." A fifth grade girl writes, "You know what else my dad does? He braids my hair. I'm the only girl I know whose dad braids her hair. I think that's a perfect dad. He already is the world's greatest dad to me. I just wanted everyone to know that." A sixth grader writes, "One time I had an assembly and I was a soloist. My dad was in the first row, and after my song I smiled at my dad, and my dad smiled back and started crying. That was the best thing I ever saw." So the news for dads isn't all bad. Still, Father's Day is known as the day grown kids call home to speak to dad. If you got a Father's Day present, I hope it was something you can really use. Actually, dads, in monetary terms, what can our children give us that we cannot purchase for ourselves? In a society as affluent as ours, it is a real challenge to give anyone anything they truly need. What do you give to someone who has everything? Now, you and I may not feel like we have everything, but think about it. Don't we basically have everything we need? Most of the things we want are simply bigger and better variations of what we already have. What do you give to people who have everything? That's what I want to talk about for just a few moments today. Jesus called his 12 disciples to him and gave them authority to drive out evil spirits and to heal every disease and sickness. Then he sent them out with these instructions. "Do not go among the Gentiles or enter any town of the Samaritans. Go rather to the lost sheep of Israel. As you go, preach this message. The kingdom of heaven is near. Heal the sick, raise the dead, cleanse those who have leprosy, drive out demons." Then he adds these powerful words, "Freely you have received, freely give." Here's the motivation for all evangelism, all works of justice, all foreign missions. Freely you have received, freely give. We have so much that the first thing we need to see, we have so much. A visitor from third world countries came to the United States. As he was riding through a subdivision, he noticed a car backing out of the garage. And he said with amazement, "You even have houses for your cars." Now that reminds me of something humorist Will Rogers once said in the midst of the Great Depression. Will Rogers, who had seen grinding poverty in other parts of the world, said of America, "We'll hold the distinction of being the only nation that ever went to the poorhouse in an automobile." Dr. Samuel Zumwalt tells about one of his friends who was a recovering alcoholic. When this friend went on a mission trip to Honduras, her whole worldview shifted. She said to Dr. Zumwalt, "I have always felt poor since I lost my big 4-bedroom house in a divorce. Then I came to Honduras and saw how the victims of Hurricane Mitch were thrilled to have these 2-room houses that we were building there. She said, I came back to my 600 square foot condominium and saw that I live in a place compared to them, in a palace, compared to them. I'm rich, and I never knew it until I went to Honduras. We are rich, if we only knew it. That is why we need to listen closely to Jesus' words. Freely you have received, freely give. Motivational speaker Tony Robbins tells about something life-changing that occurred on Thanksgiving Day many years ago. A young boy woke up with a sense of foreboding. His family was in dire financial straits. They didn't have much to look forward to that Thanksgiving Day, just a meager meal. They were too proud to ask for charity, and this led to frustration and harsh words between mom and dad. The boy was devastated to watch his mother and father become more and more angry and depressed with each passing hour. Then suddenly, there was a loud and a totally unexpected knock on the door. Standing there was a tall man in rumpled clothing, grinning broadly and carrying a huge basket. In that basket was a multitude of good foods: turkey, stuffing, pies, sweet potatoes, canned goods. The man at the door said, "This is from someone who knows your need and wants you to know that you are loved and cared for." The father tried to protest, but the man holding the basket said, "I'm just a delivery person. Have a great Thanksgiving." In that brief encounter, says Tony Robbins, this young man's life was changed. The kindness of the stranger would never be forgotten. The young man vowed that someday he would repay that grand gesture. By the time this young man was 19 years old, he had begun to fulfill that promise. That Thanksgiving, with his own earnings, he set out to purchase groceries, not for himself, but for two families that he knew were in need. When he arrived at the first house, he was greeted by a Latina woman with her 6 children. Her husband had abandoned the family only 2 days before. They had no food. You can imagine the pandemonium when this young man went to his car and started bringing in turkey and stuffing and sweet potatoes and canned goods and all the things that he had bought for this family. The children shrieked, and the woman started exclaiming, "You are a gift from God. You, a gift from God." "No," said the young man, "I'm just a delivery boy. This is a gift from a friend." The young man was sharing with others because someone first shared with him. Actually, this is the personal story of Tony Robbins himself. He was the boy whose stressed-out family received the Thanksgiving basket and who turned around and began giving out similar baskets at 19 years of age. And because, as a motivational speaker, he has achieved astounding success, Robbins also started a foundation that has given Thanksgiving baskets to hundreds of thousands of people over the years. Freely you have received, freely give. We are rich if we only knew it. That is why we need to listen closely to Jesus' words. Freely you have received, freely give. Here's the motivation for all good works. Freely you have received, freely give. Of course, when Jesus spoke these words to his disciples, he was not talking about financial blessings. He was talking about the spiritual blessings the disciples had received through him. His love, his grace, his peace. He was asking them to go out into the world to share the faith that he had nurtured in them. Pastor Daniel Witkowski tells about a coffee mug that he found in a gift shop at an abbey. He says he paid a ridiculous price for it. That was because of the inscription on the side of the mug. It read like this: "God danced the day you were born. You are loved. You are beautiful. You are a gift from God, his own possession. You are a gift to all humankind, God's gift of love to them." Pastor Witkowski figured, shoot, that's worth $11. And thus he says, against all odds, I bought the most expensive coffee mug I've ever owned. But he claims that this mug is now one of the most valuable things he owns because it reminds him of the mission of Jesus to share the message that every human being is loved, beautiful, a gift of God. It is a gift to humankind. You and I are loved by God. This makes us spiritually rich if we only knew it. We have treasures that are not dependent on the stock market or the size of our bank accounts or the resale value of our house. We are rich because we are loved. We are loved by other people, and we are loved by God. We are particularly mindful of our family relationships on a special occasion such as Father's Day. To know that we are loved is the greatest gift we can receive from a parent. And to know we have a heavenly parent who loves us is the most wonderful gift of all. In 1997, a soldier in Jordan went on a rampage and shot and killed 7 Israeli schoolgirls who were on a field trip to the island of Peace, which is a park on the Jordan River between Israel and Jordan. 2 of the girls were killed on the spot, and the others were taken to a Jordanian hospital that later died, some due to mistreatment. In the midst of anguish and anger and alienation without warning, King Hussein, the king of the country where this crazy gunman lived, left his throne, left his palace, left his very country without notifying photographers and journalists, and entered the homes of the families of the slain girls. King Hussein, in all his majesty and grandeur, entered each of the modest homes of these grieving families and fell on his knees. He bowed down before them. In each home he looked into the eyes of the mother, the father, the sisters, the brothers, and all the people who were grieving the loss of each young girl, and said, "I beg you, forgive me. Your daughter is like my daughter. Your loss is my loss. May God help you to bear your pain." And the king, humbled before them, bowed and walked out to go back to his country, back to his sovereignty. This king, this Muslim king, gave us an image of our relationship with Christ. The God of all the universe humbled himself and came into our world to show us how much we are loved. And now it is our job to take that love to others. Freely you have received, freely give. In 1995, Cal Ripken Jr. broke what many believed was baseball's unbreakable record, Lou Gehrig's record for consecutive games played, which was 2,130. Known as baseball's all-time Ironman, Ripken retired from baseball in 2001 after 21 seasons with the Baltimore Orioles. His name appeared in the record books repeatedly, most notably as one of only 7 players in history to amass 400 home runs and 3,000 hits. Ripken regularly gives the credit for all his accomplishments to the example and teachings of his father, Cal Ripken Sr. Now, Cal Ripken Sr. was a former baseball player, coach, and scout for the Orioles. In 1987 and 1988, Cal Ripken Sr. managed the Orioles, and both Cal Ripken Jr. and his brother Billy played for the team that year, a first in baseball history. In 1996, Cal Ripken Sr. was inducted into the Orioles Hall of Fame, and Cal Ripken Jr. was asked to say a few words about his father. It was an emotional moment. The younger man struggled to find just the right words. Finally, he decided to tell a story about his own 2 children. Rachel, who was 6 years old, and her little brother Ryan, who was 3. They had been bickering for weeks, and one day Ripken heard Rachel taunt Ryan. She said, "You're just trying to be like Daddy." After a few moments, Cal asked Rachel, "What's wrong with trying to be like Dad?" When he finished telling this story, Cal Ripken Jr. looked at his father and said, "That's what I've tried to do." And that is what Christ expects out of his disciples. He expects us to try to be like Dad, to be like our Heavenly Father who gave himself so completely for the world. Freely you have received, freely give. That's our challenge. Now let's get with it. Amen.